Hello, everyone who may be here early. Robert here. Welcome to the pre-show for Brutally Honest Tuesdays. I always come on a little bit earlier just to make sure that everything is working from a technical perspective and getting ready for the pre-show, which is just an opportunity for us to connect, excuse me, casually, to just kind of say hello and connect casually before the official show begins. So if you happen to be here this early, please say hello through the comments or the chat box. Let me know your name and where you're from. I always love to know. If you happen to be watching this on a video replay, you can go ahead and fast forward if you want, or you can stick around and watch this pre-show activity. But if you fast forward it, you should be able to see pretty obviously where the official show actually begins. So let me make sure that we are cool. We are cool on YouTube. I can see that I'm on and I'm fine on YouTube. I'm waiting to see that we're coming on Facebook. Forgive me looking away to my main control machine here, which, by the way, I need to minimize that. That's good. All right, so we should be coming on soon with Facebook. There we go. So everything's working well from a technical perspective, at least so far. Again, if you're there, please say hello and give me your name and where you're from, and also just confirm that you can see me and hear me fine. Everything looks fine from my end. Let me see if we've got anybody saying hello yet. Let me see here. All right, just put a little welcome message in there from YouTube. Hello, David from Olympia, Washington. You can see me and hear me fine. Thank you very much. I've mentioned this before. You'd be surprised how finicky live streaming video is or can be, you know, and it's amazing that it works at all and that it works as well as it does. But sometimes there's some hiccups and it's hard for me to know from here. So you always have to check. So welcome, David. Nice to have you here. Nice to have connected with you on the call Saturday. Let me see. Everything else is looking good. I'm not seeing anyone else that's here this early, but let me reset the website. By the way, this shirt here is, I don't know if you know, David or anyone else watching, this is from one of my favorite TV shows, Westworld. We're in season 2 now, and I haven't made up my mind yet on season 2, but season 1 was absolutely off the charts amazing to me on so many levels, including displaying truth with a capital T in plain sight, kind of like the first Matrix movie did, you know, great story. But it also shared a lot of truth with a capital T in amazing ways. So Delos is the company that owns Westworld in the story. It's the business. And so whenever there's something that I really love or an experience that I have, I love to get a t-shirt to symbolize it. So that's what this t-shirt is that I'm wearing today, in case you're curious. Hello, Helly. Oli, I guess, from Denmark. Welcome back. I think you've been here every week so far, or at least most of them. I'm thrilled to have you. Marion, hello from Oklahoma City. And by the way, forgive me for the times that you probably already heard me, most of you that are on right now that I'm aware of. I have to look away from the camera from time to time in order to do something technical. I don't have a staff and I don't have a producer. I have to do everything myself. And so sometimes I have to look away at various computers to do things away from the camera. So hello, Marion. I'm thrilled to have you here. I think you've been with us before from what I remember, a bunch of the episodes so far. So cool, welcome. Hilda, hi, I'm Hilda from Venezuela. Well, welcome. I'm not sure, but I think you're the first person that I know of that's been on the show from South America. So welcome. I have been to Peru, but that's the only place in your part of the world that I have visited so far on my journey. We'll see how that changes, but welcome. I'm so happy to have you. And again, it's such a great time to be alive with the internet that can connect us all together from all over the world. That never would have been possible when I was a kid. That never would have been possible even whatever 15 years ago, 20 years ago or something. Welcome, Lisa or Liza from Denmark. Welcome, and always forgive me if I mispronounce anybody's name. I do my best. It's so hard today from my bias. Let me see here. Hi, Penny from Overland Park, Kansas, who has been with us before. At least I think that's a current. That may have been from, let me see here. Well, something changed here. Oh, here it is. Okay. So Megan Ellis from Ohio, welcome back, Megan. You've been a frequent participant here, and I'm thrilled to see you here again. Yes, it was Penny. That was a current one from Overland Park, Kansas. Welcome. Let's see. Let me refresh the people on the website. You probably know, but in case you don't, I have this simultaneously going to YouTube and to 2 locations on Facebook, and then also on my website, just to give people different options to be able to participate in the way that they would like to. All of them have chat boxes or comments, and so when I make comments like that, great. Ralph from Germany, welcome. Megan, love being here. Awesome. I do too. As you've heard me say, all of you that have been here before, I've really been loving doing this show, looking forward to it. I get up very early in the morning these days, and so I don't want to start anything, big and complicated. Let me start the pre-show countdown. I don't want to start anything complicated on the morning when I'm going to do the show, and I do have to do a bunch of prep work, but there's some kind of dead spots in the morning when I'm excited and ready to go, but it's not time for the show to start yet. So let me see if there's anybody else new to say hello to here. It looks like not at the moment. So if anybody else would like to say anything in a casual chat kind of a way, not questions, not official stuff, not about the teachings or content, but just in a social way, feel free. And if you have joined us and you have not already said hello, I'd love it if you could say hello and tell me your name and where you're from. That's always really fun for me. And cool. At the moment, it's pretty quiet. This is, again, what I call the pre-show. If you're watching this on a video replay, you're welcome to watch this or to just fast forward to where the show actually starts. The pre-show is 10 to 15 minutes before the show, when I come on and to make sure everything's okay technically and just to be able to connect with people casually before the actual show begins and we get focused on what we're talking about. So let's see. Megan says, love the longer day and night here in the USA right now. Megan, I don't remember where you're from or what time zone you're in. I'm on US Eastern time. I have mixed emotions about all of that in terms of what appears in inner space in my language. The way my body works, I tend to wake up whenever the sun comes out. My bedroom's pretty dark, but it's not completely blackout, and I tend to wake up when the sun rises. And so if the sun's rising earlier, which it is now for me, I end up waking up earlier than normal, which is okay. But it's kind of funny sometimes when the time changes. But I think maybe you're from California. I can't remember. Oh, Ohio. I'm sorry. So you're on the same time zone as me. Okay, cool. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Let's see. Adriana from Calgary, Canada. Have you started watching season 2 of Westworld? Yeah, I've been watching it every week. I watched it last. I was watching actually the NBA playoffs with the Cleveland Cavaliers on Sunday night. So I watched Westworld yesterday. I recorded it, and I've been watching it. I haven't, excuse me, made up my mind yet. If you remember, those of you that are Westworld fans, excuse me, It's kind of like, for season 2, it's kind of like the way The Matrix was for me. There were 3 Matrix movies, and to me, they were all great stories, and I enjoyed them all in different ways, but only the first one had so much truth with a capital T staring you in the face, explained in a really great way. Excuse me again. And then while the second 2 movies were great stories, they didn't have that much truth in them. And Westworld Season 1 was just so amazing for the purposes of what I teach and share and guide people on with the Ultimate Freedom Experience. And I haven't seen as much of that so far. In Season 2, I'm waiting to see where they're going to take it. I think there's been 6 episodes now, so they only have 4 episodes left in a 10-episode season to kind of tie it all together. So I'm curious where it's going. But I still love it from a story perspective, from a production perspective, and I'm curious what twists and turns and things there are going to be in the final episodes of Season 2. And then if you don't know, they've made it clear publicly that if there's going to be a Season 3, which I think there will be, there's going to be a longer break because they want to take more time to be able to do it the way that they want to do it. So Season 3 may not be next year like Season 2 was a year after Season 1. So we'll see. But it's still one of my favorite shows, but I'm still very curious to see where it goes. Have you been watching, Adriana? Let's see if anyone else has come on. Adriana, Me Too. Curious to see where it's going to go. Is that what the Me Too is? Let me see. Okay. If you've just come on, this is the pre-show. Opportunity to just connect casually. Please say hello and let me know where you're from. Unless you just have some shyness, liking to hide and not participate that way. But I would sure love it. I love to know who's there and where you're from. And if you don't, you don't. But that's my invitation. Santana. Hey, Robert. Santana, where are you from, please? I always love to know. Welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. Let me see here. View 3 more comments. Did I miss anybody? Nope. I have said hello to everyone that I can see that is here. Santana's from California. Welcome. Happy to have you here. You can see the timer on your screen. When that hits 0, that's when we will officially start the show. If there's anything else that anybody would like to share in a casual sense. Candace, hi from San Francisco Bay Area. Hello, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. I've been to San Francisco many times in my life, but not recently. Most of the traveling, ironically, that I've been doing lately has been international. It has not been within the United States. So, but I love it in San Francisco. Penny, not sure if this showed up. Hi, I'm Penny from Overland Park, Kansas. Yes, it's interesting. I'm streaming this to the group and also to the Facebook page, and I can't tell. It looks like some of the comments are displaying on both, and some of them only one. Inyara, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Hello from Latvia. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here. Let me see. Where are we? 3 minutes. Let's see if someone's trying to join the group at the last minute. No. Okay. Let's see if we have anything else. I am not seeing anything on the live page on my website yet, anyway. All right. We've got a couple of minutes left. If you want to say hello and tell me where you're from and just connect socially, we got about a little under 3 minutes left before the show officially begins. Take a look here. No, looks like I have connected with everybody that I can see so far. Again, if you did not hear me explain it, this shirt is from the Westworld TV show. Delos is the name of the company that owns the amusement park. That is what Westworld's all about, and I love it. And when I love anything, I try to get a t-shirt or something so that I can wear it and honor it and enjoy it offline at different times, even when I'm not, whatever it is that I watch it or listen to it or whatever else it is, and I figured I'd wear it today. When I used to do videos many years ago, I used to use the mic that clipped on here. And that's tricky with t-shirts, and sometimes I want to be able to wear t-shirts, which is what I wear most of the time when I'm home or I'm working. So I ended up putting these mics in here that they're called boom mics. So I don't have to clip it on here, and I can wear anything that I want and not be concerned. And so this is Westworld T-shirt Day. All right, we're almost out of time on the pre-show. Let me take one last look. If you're there and you want to introduce yourself and say hello, about a minute left on the pre-show. I'd love to hear from you. Julie, hi, Julie from California. Welcome, Julie. You've been a frequent participant on this show. I appreciate it. I'm happy to have you here. Let's see. That's everybody so far. So we got our countdown here to the till the show officially beginning. Have one more drink of water before we do that. Tara from Tempe, Arizona. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Welcome. Thrilled to have you with us, Tara. I think you've been with us before, from what I remember, but maybe it was somebody else with that name. But anyway, welcome. Happy to have you here. Diane, hello from Southern Indiana. Been following you for a while. I'm happy to hear that. I've been following me for a while too. All right, so from where I am, we got almost at the 10-second countdown. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Ultimate Freedom Teachings video series. Welcome to the Brutally Honest Tuesdays show, a place that you can come every week to say goodbye to hype, dead ends, and frustration, and hello to the truth that sets you free. I'm Robert Scheinfeld, and I will be your host. In case you don't know, I'm a New York Times best-selling author, a speaker, a coach, an entrepreneur, and a major renegade, thus the title of this show. I'm also the creator of the Ultimate Freedom Experience, my life's work. The purpose of this show every week is to drop major drops in the pond of your life, your consciousness, your awareness that can ripple out and affect you long after each episode ends. And the purpose is also to push hard and aggressively on lies, illusions, and stories so that you can discover and experience the truth with capital T's that's out there waiting for you. Welcome to episode 7 of Brutally Honest Tuesdays. In case you weren't on the pre-show, you didn't hear me explain it, I'm wearing this t-shirt today in honor of the Westworld TV show that I really love. It's in season 2, and Delos is the name of the company that owns the amusement park that Westworld is based on, and I get a big kick out of wearing clothes and t-shirts related to things that I'm participating in. So welcome to episode 7. The topic today is going to be, why do bad things happen to good people? And if you've been with me for a while now, this episode, episodes 2 through 6, were designed to build on one another and to lay a very solid foundation that we can work with, get everybody kind of on the same page. If they are aware of some of the things or a lot of the things that I share, or they're new. And so it was very important, and if you're watching this and you have not watched all of 2 through 6, or some of them you haven't watched, my very strong invitation to you would be, when you have the time, if you feel so moved, catch up and watch so that you've seen all episodes 2 through 6, because we're going to start to move from there in the future. It's not going to be as important that you're aware of everything that I've shared sequentially, but for the first 2 through 7, this one finally, 2 through 7 episodes. It's very important because they're designed to combine together and build on one another. So before we actually begin this episode, just a couple quick logistical things in case you're new or you missed this before. This show is designed to be about an hour, give or take a couple of minutes. The design is that for the first 30 minutes, I will share, teach, whatever you want to call it, coach in a way, in this way. And then there is 30 minutes of questions and answers. And the questions and answers are primarily designed to be about the content of this specific episode, but they can also be about previous episodes of this show. I do not answer questions or offer coaching or support on books or courses or events or other things that I do. The Q&A section is about the content primarily of this show or any of the other shows that have preceded it. So, if you have not already gotten a copy of this guide, I would like to strongly invite you to get a copy and read it. It will also start a journey into a multi-step interactive video training to go more deeply into the kinds of topics that I'm sharing here. And so I'd like to invite you to get a copy of that guide if you haven't already. If you miss some or all of this episode, and or you want to join my email list specifically for Brutally Honest Tuesdays, which I strongly suggest that you do, as a way that I can communicate with you only about the show and also give you a special extra information and benefits, you can do it there. If you miss some or all of it, that's how you can get access to replays. And it's easy to remember. My website, robertscheinfeld.com/BHT, which stands for Brutally Honest Tuesdays. And my request to you is, if you like what you're experiencing here as a replay live, I ask you to please to help me and to help others and maybe to have fun yourself, give gifts yourself, to like, comment, or share this show. I'd love your help to grow the audience, to be able to help more people, to be able to give more gifts, and I'd appreciate your help with that if you feel so moved. All right, so the topic for this week. Is that everything I wanted to say? Oh, I have to give you my quote of the week for this week. I actually have 3 quotes for you today. I'll share this first one now, and I'll share the other 2 later. If you've been with me, you may remember that sometimes the quotes make perfect sense right now at the beginning of the show, and then they take on another light, add some more clarity later on in the show, after you've gotten some more of the content. So here's the first quote. If you're watching on Facebook and you got just the little thing, the little video screen, you might want to click on that to make it bigger so that you can see this quote easier. But here's the first quote of the week. This is from a book called Origin from Dan Brown. He's talking about a character in the 2 characters in the story. Langdon also marveled that Edmund had never once complained about the rigors of his childhood. Instead, he had declared himself fortunate for the early hardship because it had served as a potent motivation for Edmund to achieve his 2 childhood goals. First, to get out of poverty, and second, to help expose the hypocrisy of the faith he believed destroyed his mother. So that quote is pointing towards something that is part of the theme today. Why do bad things, and I keep going like this because we're going to push on the word bad from a variety of different angles. Why do bad things happen to good people, which is the way it appears to so many of us in our minds. It certainly did to me. Why does all this bad stuff keep happening to me when I was in the middle of it? So to begin our discussion of that, I want to show you a short video. You may have seen it before. You may not have. I had never seen it. And then all of a sudden, I don't even remember how I found it, but I saw it and I went, wow. I knew a lot of the story but that it's pointing to, but I went, wow, I need to use that. So here is a video just for you to watch quickly, and then we'll come back and talk about it. again, you may have seen that video before, you may have been aware of the story, or you may not have been, and it's probably pretty obvious why I'm sharing that at the start of this show. Because look at that story. At so many points on that story, if you had talked to J.K. Rowling, how would she have described what's happening to her and what's going on? I mean, you got severe depression, you've got wanting to commit suicide, you've got being abused, you've gotten all the bad luck that she's talking about. At so many points in her story, her mind would have said, this sucks. This is a terrible life. Why is this happening to me? I don't like it. And I'm not aware of the fact, but I don't know what the truth is. I don't know whether J.K. Rowling tried personal development, spiritual development, counseling, whatever else, to try to deal with the things that were so painful for her. I'm not aware that she went down that path, but she might have. But these are the kinds of things. And this kind of takes back to what I talked about last week, which is that all of us have a specific mission and purpose and journey that we came here to take. And that journey unfolds over our entire lifetime, however long that is. And as you know, for different people, the journeys are longer or shorter. But it's a story, it's a journey that unfolds over time. And you can't really judge it accurately until it has unfolded either completely or a certain part of it has fully expressed itself. But if we freeze moments in an incomplete story, in an incomplete journey, and then the mind judges it in that moment when the whole wheel hasn't completed its turn, when a particular series of scenes, if you will, have not completed themselves, it's going to be distorted, it's going to be inaccurate. And I just wanted to push on that with that story from J.K. Rowling. And it also begs to answer the question that I'll touch on here and we'll talk more about in future episodes, which is, what does the word bad really mean? And we'll get into this in a different way in this episode as well. Now, there are a lot of things in J.K. Rowling's journey that all of those things perfectly supported her journey that I have no idea about. Because again, our journeys, our missions, our purposes are complicated and they have many different facets to them. But you better believe that all those experiences and all those feelings and the thoughts that she had and the struggles and wanting to die and all of these kinds of things, you better believe that that made her a better writer. And it made her able to create the characters that so many people throughout the world have come to love, because of the experiences that she had that she could draw on. So in the moment that these things happened that were so difficult, if you froze them, the mind could sure say that this is bad and this is terrible and I'd like to stop this, I'd like to make this go away, I'd like to heal this, whatever else. But her mission, her purpose, her journey was perfectly unfolding. Those experiences were perfectly contributing to it. Now, in this case, it had a payoff. You know, it had a gigantic success story and touching the world in a huge way and becoming very wealthy. That is not always parts of our story. But whether something like that happens or not, the same thing holds true. Now, let me give you another example. This is a picture of my grandfather, Aaron Scheinfeld. If you are aware of the Busting Loose Phase 2 teachings, then you've heard me talk about him. And you know that he had a profound influence on me when I was 12 years old that started me on this journey. Let me tell you a story about him that you may not know. When he was a young man, he was a lawyer. He was an attorney. And he was not rich. I don't even know if you'd call him prosperous back then, but he was comfortable. He was a successful attorney, 3 kids, married. And then, like so many people, just before in the United States what's called the Great Depression and the stock market crash, he borrowed a lot of money, like so many people did, to invest in this crazy stock market, hoping that he would make a fortune and that he would get rich. And then when the stock market crashed, he lost everything and had a huge amount of debt and a family. And now the way he was as a person, his definition of integrity was, if I borrowed money from you and I'm going to pay you back every single cent with interest, no matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult it is for me. Most people in that time, they just went bankrupt and they defaulted on the majority of their debts, wiped the slate clean. But my grandfather wasn't willing to do that. And I don't know exactly, I can't remember, but I believe that it took him 20 years to pay these people back all of the money that he had borrowed to speculate in the stock market in the 20s in the United States with interest, with great sacrifice to himself and his family. And for a long time back then, I don't know if you know from your own family or other stories, a lot of times he bartered his attorney services for chickens or for vegetables or for food or for something that somebody else, they bartered because nobody had any money. I mean, his family really struggled. And in my language, the mind machines of the people in the family, not my grandfather, but the other members of the family, most notably his wife, my grandmother, and my father, were traumatized by this experience of losing absolutely everything. So ultimately, my grandfather paid all this back with interest. Later on, he got the idea for Manpower, which, by the way, I talked about this a few episodes before, and we'll talk about it again in the future. He got the idea, but the reality is the idea popped into his mind, popped into what I call inner space out of nowhere when he was on the docks of Chicago one day. So you could say that it was his idea, but the question, you have to beg the question, where do ideas really come from? But that's a tease for a future show. Anyway, long story short, he gets the idea for Manpower, and he starts the company. And in the beginning, it wasn't very successful, and there were struggles, and then they wanted to grow, and they needed money to grow. So guess what happened? He went back to the same people that he had borrowed money from, and that he had paid back every single cent with interest at great sacrifice to himself. And so guess what they said? I mean, number one, they liked the idea, but the bankers said, we're going to loan him the money to help him build Manpower, the company, because we know we like the idea and we like his business plan and everything else, but we know one way or another, we're going to get our money back. And so that bad thing that happened and that he struggled so much for came back later. He never would have predicted that or imagined that. Came back later to support him in building his greatest success. Who would have known? And you still could say that what happened was bad, but it really begs the question of what does bad really mean? If bad means this is how my mind is telling a story about what's happening right now with the limited perspective that I have, the limited knowledge that I have, then I suppose you could say that bad is reasonably accurate. But if you look at the whole journey, was it a bad thing that he struggled like that? Was it a bad thing that J.K. Rowling had some of those experiences that served her in various ways, also made her a better writer? And this brings me to my second quote for you. Oh, actually, that's the wrong one. Sorry. This is my second quote. To use an analogy, it's as if a lengthy film is being shown in your theaters, and all you see is one single frame of the film, of the entire picture, and trying to explain what the film is about and the plot of the story from just that one little thing that you're seeing. That's another way of pushing on what I've been saying here. So I want to tell you a third story, which I brought up too fast. This is Steve Jobs. Most of you probably know his face as the founder of Apple and then later the CEO of Apple before he died. Let's look at his story. And you may know this, you may not, but it's a perfect illustration of what I'm pushing on here this week. So, very quickly, at a very young age, Steve Jobs becomes co-founder of Apple. The company becomes very successful. He becomes extremely rich and has an opportunity to change the world with this different way of having a computer operating system. Now, his mind at that point would have called it what? Good or bad? Good, right? Started this company, it's successful, I'm rich, all this stuff, right? Okay, let's move on. Ultimately, he ended up making a bunch of mistakes. And he ended up being fired from his own company by the management team. He was kicked out of his own company. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? How do you think he looked at it at the time? Bad, right? All right, so that happens. He's still rich. He still has Apple stock, and Apple's doing well. But he's so angry about what happened that over time he sells all of his Apple stock. And he takes the money and he starts another company, which maybe you remember, maybe you don't. It was called Next, N-E-X-T. An interesting story at the time. I really was excited by what he was doing there, and I actually did this big FedEx fancy thing that I sent to him trying to get a job working for him when he founded that company. He had a lot of money to seed it. He raised millions and millions and millions of dollars from other entrepreneurs. The company failed, and he had to close it down. He still has some money despite that, and he does what he does for a number of years. Then he stumbles across a little company that is changing the way that cartoon animated movies are being made. We all know it now. It's called Pixar. He stumbles across this and he buys it because he gets excited by what this company is doing, and obviously was looking for something else to do at that point. So he gets involved with Pixar, and they have this very talented team, and they have this great technology, but they're still not very successful. And he keeps adding money, helping it to be successful, and it isn't yet. Great potential, but it's still struggling. So, and by the way, with the Next thing, the company failed. So was that a bad thing? He probably looked at it as a bad thing. His mind probably defined it as a bad thing at the time. So then he moves on to Pixar, and in funding it to try to help it to be successful, he almost goes broke because he's gone through all this money that he's had, and there was a tremendous amount of stress with Pixar. Is that a good or a bad thing? Bad, right? So, what ends up happening, ultimately, Pixar becomes very successful and changes the world in terms of movies and animation, and he makes a lot of money from that. Then he gets invited back to Apple to lead Apple again, having had all of these experiences. And something that you may not know, that I didn't know until I discovered it about a year ago, is that when Steve Jobs was at Pixar and he was immersed in what I call the art of storytelling, he learned about stories and how people love stories and how people resonate with stories and eat them up. And when he went back to Apple, he took that with him, and he radically changed the way that Apple did its marketing based on stories and storytelling and what he had learned from Pixar. Ultimately, as you know, he had one success after another and helped Apple to become much bigger, much more successful financially, and then changed the world. Multiple industries, changed the music industry, changed the cell phone industry with the iPhone, changed the world and became a hero to so many people. Now, if he had not been kicked out of Apple, a bad thing, it wouldn't have happened. If Next, his second attempt at a technology company, had been successful, if it hadn't failed, another bad thing, that wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have been a hero. He wouldn't have changed the world. He wouldn't have developed the iPhone and all these other kinds of things. If he had not almost run out of money with Pixar, if he had not gotten involved with Pixar, if he had not learned about storytelling with Pixar, none of that would have happened. And so, again, there was a plan for his life. There was a mission, a purpose, a journey, an intelligent plan that was working its way through all these things. But if you freeze specific moments, the mind can say good, bad, like, dislike, fight against, want to change, fix, or improve. But look at these examples that I've given you. And again, Steve Jobs is a great example. And by the way, when he was at Next and he developed this new technology, he developed a new computer, hardware, and a new operating system, software. The operating system that he developed for Next that failed, he ultimately sold back to Apple And if you are a Mac user right now, what's called OS X is that software that's been enhanced since. But you can see how all of this kind of came back and ended up creating this extraordinary success and making him a hero, literally, changing the world. None of it would have happened if there had not been a whole bunch of, and there's a lot more than what I talked about, quote unquote, bad things that happened along the way. So again, the things I'm wanting to push on here, and I was going to talk about my story too, but this is taken too long, so maybe I'll do that in a future episode. Same thing's true of me. At the time of this show, I'm 61 years old. And the vast majority of my life until I hit my early 50s, I could have said was bad. Difficult, painful, struggle. You may know, you may not. In those days, what I now call the old Robert, if you had put me under a truth drug or hypnotized me and said, give me one word to describe your life, I would have said tortured. And I really would have meant that. It was a whole series of bad things that I was fighting against and resisting against and trying to use techniques to change, fix, and improve. But if all those things hadn't happened, I would not have had this extraordinary experience that I call the ultimate freedom experience. And I never would have become a teacher, and I never would have become a writer, and I never would have become a coach, and I never would have had the experience I had or had this delicious experience of working with people like you all over the world and literally changing the world through these things that were discovered through all that bad stuff, all that pain happened. So this is the third quote that I want to show you now that I've shared that with you. Oh, I already showed you that one, sorry. Is this it? Yeah. You may know Napoleon Hill, who's famous for some self-help books, but this was a quote from him. Every great leader of the past, whose record I have examined, was beset by difficulties and met with temporary defeat before arriving, meaning before ultimately becoming successful. This stuff is rampant. And as I mentioned to you last week, I'll mention again now, I'll mention again in the future, you see this. If you read any biography about somebody's life, particularly people who've been very successful or somehow impacted the world in a big way, you can see the intelligent unfolding of a plan. And you can see that so many things that appeared bad, that were judged as bad in the moment, freezing an incomplete story, were actually good because they were contributing to a future destination, to a future experience, to whatever their life was ultimately really about, the many complex things that can be. And so this is the opportunity, and it odds are, I mean, everybody that comes into my sphere of influence, they tell me the same story. We're all like this, you know? There are these things that happen to us, and the mind does its thing and separates it into positive, negative, good, bad, painful, pleasurable, whatever it is, fights against it, tries to change it, fix it, improve it, make it go away, bring something new in, all these things we've talked about, and you know if you've been on a journey of personal or spiritual development, but it's all based on this distortion. It's all based on this lie, illusion, and story of taking a long journey that has not completed itself, freezing specific moments in an incomplete story, judging those frozen moments, and drawing conclusions from them, and then we're off to the races on suffering, being unhappy, trying to find techniques to change, fix, or improve it, or whatever else. Now, by the way, I'm not saying don't ever use a technique or do anything to try to change, fix, and improve your life. That's not the message here. The message here is just a ripple, a drop in your pond to ripple out to suggest that so much of the time, what the stories that the mind tells us are distortions, lies, illusions, and stories. They're not true. And by the way, I'll give you another tease, sneak preview next week. Now that we have episodes 2 through 7, including this one in place, next week, I'm going to answer the question and focus on the obvious question that comes from all these things I've been sharing with you in episodes 2 through 7, and, including today, which is, okay, fine, Robert, I get all this stuff that you're saying, but how am I supposed to live my life? What am I supposed to do day to day? What am I supposed to do when I'm feeling lousy? What am I supposed to do when my finances or my relationships or something's going on with my body and I really want to change, fix, and improve something? Fine. You know, I can tell myself, oh, this is just an incomplete story and I'm freezing and distorting and judging it when it's, I understand that. That doesn't work. There's lots of techniques out there, that are like that, affirmations, different things, do a really cute positive phrase, and keep repeating it over and over and over to yourself, but with very few exceptions, that stuff never works. So the obvious question is, okay, I get everything you've been saying, Robert, including here today, but so let's get practical. How do I live my life then? How do I make decisions? What do I do when it appears that bad things are happening to me? And we'll start the discussion of that next week. So this is what I wanted to share with you and push on. I could tell you a zillion stories. In the Ultimate Freedom Experience that I offer, I actually spend, I think it's maybe 3-4 hours on one of the days telling my story from birth all the way up to the Ultimate Freedom Awakening, and my story is my language for it. I can tell you, and I do in the Ultimate Freedom Experience, I can tell you all kinds of stories like J.K. Rowling, like Steve Jobs, like my grandfather, like me. And again, look at any documentary, any biography, it's rampant. You may know people that are like this. Something happened to them, and it was interpreted as a bad thing, but it ended up leading to something else later. And it just, again, begs the question, what does good really mean? What does bad really mean? And what's really going on as we are struggling in our lives, trying to change, fix, and improve our lives, trying to achieve particular goals and produce specific results. So that's what I wanted to share with you this week. And so now, and if you've been on the show before, you know that we're just about to go into the Q&A section. And I have a message I'm going to play for you while I'm preparing for that. And again, questions are only about what I've talked about here today. Shares, ahas, anything you want to share or ask about what I've talked about today or in the previous episodes of the show. And when you type it into the chat box or the comments or whatever you do, please put a Q with a colon before your question, because I never know how many there's going to be, and so I have to scan. And so I scan for Qs first for the questions. I may not be able to answer everybody's, but what I've been doing is if there's a question that I didn't have time to answer, I'm copying it and pasting it into a text document, and I'll find a way to address those things later. I'll do my best. I pick the ones I pick. What happens, happens. Sometimes I think, would this have universal appeal? Sometimes I just, whatever happens, happens, and that's fine. So here's the message for you, and then we'll come on back. We'll start the Q&A. So here we go. Let's see, where are we? Most of us, including me when I was younger, begin the journey into truth with a capital T with something like this going on. Now imagine that the house that you're looking at is the metaphor for your life, everything that's going on in your life. And underneath that house, underneath everything that's happening in your life and has been happening for a long time, imagine that there's a weak, wobbly, cracked foundation like what you're looking at. And you can see that when the foundation is like that, it affects everything about the house that's built on top of it. And so the opportunity then is to knock out that weak, wobbly, cracked foundation, to actually remove it, replace it with a brand new foundation that is rock solid and built on truth with a capital T. And then once there is a new foundation in place, you can then start to build new things on top of it and have radically different experiences in your life on top of it once that new, rock solid, based on truth foundation is in place. The Ultimate Freedom Experience that I offer, live and online, is designed to do just that for you, with me acting as your guide, as your coach. It is specifically designed to knock out the weak, wobbly foundation, to replace it with a new foundation built rock solid and based on truth with a capital T, and then support you in starting to experience a radically new life being built on top of that. And by the way, when I speak about weak, wobbly, cracked foundation, I am not talking about what you usually hear about, which is things in your subconscious mind, limiting beliefs, disempowering beliefs, energy things, karmic things, or whatever else. What I discovered is at the core of the weak, wobbly, cracked foundation is something radically different. If you'd like to find out more about the ultimate freedom experience that I offer, just visit my website at robertscheinfeld.com. All right, so the question and answer session is officially open. So if you have any questions, any comments about what I've shared in this episode or the previous episodes, now's the time. Again, type a Q before it, and I'll rotate between the different places where there are chat boxes or there are comments or chat boxes. So let's see what we have here. Chris says, I can easily accept that the author, with capital T and A, writes the script for the story dimension of life. What about our internal responses to the events of our lives? Is that also scripted? There's two things that I want to say. I think it's two things. We'll see what actually comes out. First of all, and I mentioned this in some of the other episodes, we can think about this kind of stuff forever. And it is possible, no disrespect intended to you or anyone else, to debate this kind of stuff forever. And it is possible from a mental, idea, concept, logical perspective to support any perspective. Make an argument about anything and support it in a positive way, make an argument against something and support it. And some people really love that. But to me, I think there's an old saying somewhere, you may have heard it, Chris or other people, something like, do you want to be right or do you want to something else? And there's an element of this on this particular path, which is, do you want to agree with this? Do you want to understand this? Or do you want your experience of life to actually change in a deep, profound, and permanent way? And ultimately, where I got to on my journey is, I don't care what the mind says. I don't care what the mind thinks. I don't care about what's going on at the idea, concept, logical, intellectual level. I want my life to change. And in my case, as I said, I was miserable. I was an unhappy camper. I could not create stable success, prosperity, abundance. And I wanted my experience to change. I wanted my life to change. And I didn't care what was going on here anymore. So I just want to make that point. I'm going to answer your question, but ultimately, I invite you, Chris, and everybody else listening to make a decision. Do you want to understand? Do you want to agree? Do you want to dance purely at the idea and concept level? Or do you want something to change in your life? And if you really want something, if you want to dance at the level of idea and concept, that's great. I loved doing that for years. And many, many people all over the world love, I call it the dance of ideas and concepts in the mind. That's fine. I have no judgment of that. And if what somebody deeply wants is change, transformation, and experience of truth with a capital T, experience what I call ultimate freedom, experience relief from the pain that you've been suffering, from the ups and downs, from the twists and turns, from the whatever that you've interpreted as bad, then I invite you to consider the fact that you have to let go of the noise here, drop things down to the experience level, and start moving in a different direction if you really want things to change. So having said that, my experience, not my thinking, not my understanding, my experience is that all of it is scripted. Absolutely everything that happens in our lives is scripted. And that we could talk about this for hours. Why? How does it work? Everything else. We don't have the time here. But the simple answer is, my experience is everything is scripted. If you look at a novel or a movie or a TV show, but I love the example of a novel, and we'll use the example of J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter again. If you're reading the Harry Potter books or you're watching the movie, if Harry Potter or any character thinks something, feels something, does something, makes a decision, makes a choice, suffers, or has a victory, what had to happen first? If you read it on the pages of the book or you see it on the screen, what had to happen first? Pause for dramatic effect. The writer had to write it. And my bias is the same. None of this is real. It's all an illusion. It's all put here by who we really are, what I call true creative essence. I talked about this in previous episodes. I'll talk about it again. And everything is scripted in advance in order, as I mentioned last week, for us to have our journeys, our unique experiences of thoughts and feelings and responses and all the stuff that you're asking about, but that it's all scripted in advance in exactly the same way and at the experiential level. The truth of that, not the idea of it, not understanding it, not thinking about it, not agreeing or disagreeing with it, the experience of knowing with a capital K that it's all scripted and that there's something else going on than what the mind thinks and what most people teach is what opens the door to a radically different experience of everything in your life. Again, drops in the pond that ripple out and change absolutely everything at the experiential level. That's what opens the door. So even though the mind of a lot of people say that's bad news, I don't want to believe that everything's scripted. I don't want to believe that everything's planned in advance. I don't want to think of myself as a puppet, which is not an accurate description, by the way, but it's what many minds say. But my experience, my knowing, and my journey into what I call ultimate freedom awakening was made possible by knowing and experiencing the truth of that. It's what opens the door. It's the best news ever. It's not bad news, except to certain minds, what I call the mind machines, that it's all scripted in advance. But my experience is it's all scripted in advance with an intelligent plan, with a reason that contributes to our unique missions, purposes, and journeys that unfold again over our whole lives, and you can't freeze them at certain moments and try to conclude and figure out what's going on. So let's see if we got anything else here. Again, if you've got questions, type them in, put a Q before. Comments or questions. All right, Chris has, well, this is, I don't know if this is the same Chris or a different Chris, but it's I think it's a different Chris, maybe not. In the last episode, you displayed confirmation bias when you said everything in our lives is scripted. You only look at evidence that confirms it and not what discredits it. What about children who are abused and murdered? Was that part of their stories? All right, again, let me share a few things. First of all, I have been through this show, and I am everywhere that I teach. I readily admit that I'm biased. We all are, and we're built to be biased as part of our unique missions, purposes, and journeys. I've had certain experiences. My life has changed in certain ways as a result of those experiences. And yes, definitely I am biased, but I'm not biased in the way that you describe it there, because it's not a thinking thing. It's not an understanding thing. It's not an intellectual thing. It's not an idea and a concept thing in a way that I can't explain to you because it's an experience. I've experienced the truth. There's a knowing with a capital K that goes beyond understanding ideas and concepts and thinking, that's the truth of it. And when I looked at what happened in my life after that knowing happened, the ripples that came from those drops in the pond, and I saw how my life changed, it was nothing short of a miracle. What happened as a result of experiencing, and I get that I'm not being clear on what that really means. I really can't be. It's a shift that takes place inside, which is what the ultimate freedom experience I offer is all about, and what happened to me is all about. It's not understanding or thinking or getting an A on a test. It's a gigantic shift, permanent, deep, and profound, that takes place inside of you in what I call inner space, that ripples out and changes everything in inner space, inside of you and outside of you, including with relationships, money, body, health and wellness, business and career, and everything else. So it's not that I've looked at I'm not doing a paper for college where somebody said, write a 30-page paper and defend the perspective that everything's scripted. And I pulled in logical arguments to try to support it and examples. I mean, today I brought 3 examples from 3 stories, you know, J.K. Rowling, Steve Jobs, my grandfather. I touched a little bit on mine. I didn't pull any, logical arguments from anywhere. I just told you stories, and I invite you to look at those stories and ask yourself, does that look like it was random and accidental, what happened there? Or does that look like it's the unfoldment of an intelligent plan? And whatever your mind concludes, it concludes. But my bias is children who are abused and murdered. Here's the thing, and I don't mean to communicate that I am or that you should be or whatever ice cold and not caring about whatever about other people and whatever. I'm coming from a different place here. But here's the thing. We as humans all over the world, we read stories in books. We watch stories in movies. We watch stories in TV shows. And we talk about things that happen when we are socializing with other people. And in those stories, in books, in movies, in TV shows, on the news, that people are riveted by and watch every night, and in our conversations with other people, there are stories about children and adults who are abused. And there are stories about people that are murdered. And why would it be any different that those kinds of things would be happening in this whole human experience when who we are really are, which is what this episode has been pushing on, isn't judging this as bad or awful or those poor children. The reason that we can watch stories about bad things happening to good people in movies, in books, in TV shows, on the news, in our conversations with other people, but especially when it's stories in books or movies or TV shows, is because on some level we know it's not real. Those people really aren't suffering. They're really not struggling. They haven't really been murdered. It's just a story. It's just an illusion. And we know this. And so we feel things and we think things when we're experiencing these kinds of stories about bad things happening to good people. But as I mentioned last week, ultimately from the perspective of truth with a capital T, it's all about the unique experiences that all of those things make possible. And that's why we watch these movies. That's why we watch these TV shows. That's why we read the stories and we talk about these kinds of things, because there is an enjoyment that can come, an appreciation that can come, words don't serve, from all of the experiences that are made possible through those things appearing to happen as part of an illusion. But I'll tell you again, we'll talk about this in a future episode, you can't think your way, understand your way, idea and concept your way into this shift and this transformation where the truth of all of this becomes real and it changes your life permanently. It doesn't work. The shift has to take place. And until the shift takes place, the mind can make up these stories and judge the hell out of everything. And we can suffer and struggle and be upset or angry or whatever else it is. But when this shift takes place, all of it changes. And but as long as we dance with the mind's opinion, we're off to the races with all kinds of struggles and challenges. And I mean no disrespect about any of this. And I could talk a lot longer in response to the core of your 2 questions, Chris. We don't have time here. So let's see here. Helly says, when you say scripted in advance, do you mean before we are born or along the way during our lifetime? My bias, my experience, the way truth has been shown to me is that it's all scripted before we're born. And the metaphor that I share is, imagine that your life, let's say it's 80 years, is the plan, is the journey. A book has been written of your life, of every single thing that's going to happen in those 80 years. And then you're born and the story starts to unfold. But just like the way we experience novels and movies and TV shows, it's all been done before we get there. It unfolds for us a little bit at a time, but it's been written in advance. To me, it's the same thing with us. And it really doesn't matter, because it had to have been planned in advance, because none of this exists. You know, it's a three-dimensional illusion, which is also, as you know, being documented by scientists, quantum physics right now. Somebody had to put all of this here. So even if the stuff that's happening to you today, and I don't believe this is what's happening, but if it was written yesterday, or it was written 10 years ago, or it was all written before you're born, it really doesn't matter, except in a story to the mind, because if it's written in advance, it's written in advance. Doesn't matter how far in advance. But my experience is, my knowing is, and what I believe is the most useful way to look at it, until the experience that I call ultimate freedom awakens, is as if it's all been written in advance. And again, if you look at stories like J.K. Rowling I shared with you today, you look at stories like Steve Jobs, you look at stories like my grandfather, if you accept that there was an intelligent plan going on, it couldn't have been written 5 minutes before, because whoever was writing the story for J.K. Rowling, my grandfather, Steve Jobs, and everybody else that you can read about, and me and everybody else, there are things that happened when we were 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 that had impact later. And so there's a lot of evidence at the mind level that it had to have been written in advance before you were born. And that's helpful, but that's just my knowing. And again, to me, it's the most useful way to look at it on the journey until ultimate freedom awakens. You have this shift, you have this experience where you just know at a very deep and profound level the truth of it, and then it ripples out. Santana says, if everything is scripted, does that mean we don't need to worry about consequences since what is going to happen has already been scripted? Yeah, that's true. But that's not a technique, and it's not a prescription. And my bias is you and me and everybody else, we don't have the ability to do that, you know? If somebody were to watch this video and leave and say, well, you know, I get what Robert's saying, and that kind of seems true. So then something happens and there's a consequence and you feel bad, or you feel guilty, or you feel angry, or you feel embarrassed, whatever. If you say to yourself, oh, well, I don't need to be worried about this because it was written in advance and I didn't do it, it doesn't do any good. It doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. But when this shift that I've been talking about, that the ultimate freedom experience is all about, happens, what happens naturally, automatically, and it's there 24/7 no matter what happens, is that yes, you don't worry about consequences. We'll talk about this in a future episode starting next week. Your experience of your life when ultimate freedom awakens and this shift takes place is very, very similar, but there's some important differences too, between the experience that you have when you're reading a really great story, or you're watching a really great movie, or you're watching a really great TV series that unfolds every week. Which is, if it's a great story, you're riveted by it, and you're loving it, you can't wait to see what's going to happen next. And you know, if you're reading a really great book, sometimes, you know you got to go to bed because you got to work tomorrow or whatever, and it's like, oh shit, I wish I didn't have to close this book because I'm loving it so much. I can't wait to see what's going to happen to the hero. Even if the hero's in deep shit and is struggling and is being abused, or somebody's been murdered, or whatever else it is, I can't wait to see. This is the kind of thing that's part of this shift in this experience. But it's a shift. And you can't think your way there. You can't technique your way there. You can't logic your way there. But this shift can take place, and then yes, you don't worry about consequences. You're just very curious to see where it's all going to unfold. Again, very similar to when you're experiencing stories in other ways, with some significant differences. All right, let's see. Let's go back to Tara from Tempe. Isn't this what is going on with Dolores and Maeve, etc. in Westworld? Sorry, Tara, it isn't what going on in Westworld. Could you be a little bit more specific? What's going on with Dolores and Maeve? If you could be more specific, I'd be happy to address that, but for whatever reason, I'm not clear on what you're pointing to there. Tara says, according to your bias, are our emotional responses and feelings also scripted written in advance. I think this is so. Please say more about the usefulness of the notion that even our emotions and thoughts were scripted in advance as opposed to those that are ours. Yes, again, to me, everything is scripted in advance. And again, my invitation to you, I'll repeat it because it's important. It's a metaphor, but to me, it's really accurate. If you are reading a story in a book, same thing's true with a movie or a TV show, but let's stick with reading a story in a book. If a character in the story in the book that you're reading as you're turning the pages thinks anything, feels anything, does anything, has any kind of a response to what's happening, what had to happen first before you could read it? The answer is the author had to write it. The character's not really thinking it. The character's not really feeling it. The character's not really responding. It's all the author. You know, their essence, their imagination, their creativity, whatever you want to call it, that's expressing itself as those characters having those kinds of experiences. And so, yes, everything. It's not just some things are scripted in advance and other things aren't. Everything is. If you're aware of it, in my language, appearing in inner space inside of you, or you're aware of it in what I call story space outside of you, including your body, it was scripted in advance. To me, anything, even when you dream at night and what happens in your dreams, or if you had an altered state of consciousness experience, drug-induced or near-death experience, or you may have read about that, anything that we are aware of, that we would say, this happened to me, asleep, awake, whatever, it was scripted in advance. And you said, what's the usefulness of the notion? There is no usefulness of the notion, of the idea, of the thinking. There is no usefulness for any of you to leave here and say, okay, the next time something bad happens to me, I'm just going to remind myself, it's not really bad. It's just a story from the mind. It's all been scripted in advance by this true creative essence that I really am, and I don't need to worry about it, and I don't need to feel bad about it. Doesn't work. There is no usefulness to thinking it or trying to apply it as a technique. The usefulness comes when this deep shift that I've been talking about, that I call ultimate freedom awakening, happens. There's a shift that takes place, and I can't define it here in a soundbite. And then the usefulness is off the charts because it changes absolutely everything, but it's not a technique then. You're just different. Who you are is different. How you respond to things is different. It just happens. It's not this comes up and then you use a technique to make it go back down again. Or this comes up and you use a technique to turn water into wine, to change your perception. It's not this kind of a fight or dance or war. It's that the usefulness is that everything about the way you experience everything changes radically, and it's permanent. But there isn't any usefulness to thinking it or trying to boil it down to a technique or reminding yourself or using affirmations that point to these things. To my bias, there are success stories of everything, but to my bias, all of that is ultimately worthless. There has to be this shift that takes place deep inside of us, and that ripples out and changes everything. It was a comment, not a question, about Dolores and Maeve. Well, then I'm sorry, I can't really answer the question then. Part of what's been happening in the Westworld story is that these characters have been on a journey. And they've been on a journey from being asleep to awake, from not being conscious to being conscious, to getting to know who they really are and what they really want and to be able to choose. And so, yes, the characters in Westworld have been on a journey, an extraordinary journey. And if that's what you mean, then yes, I'm pointing to the same kinds of things. And along the way, a lot of bad stuff happened to these characters. A lot of horrible stuff happened to these characters. And there's a famous line in the first season of Westworld towards the end. We're almost out of time here. Where the Anthony Hopkins character, the big boss, says, you have to really suffer before you can become conscious, some kind of a thing like that. And you're going to have to suffer more before you fully become conscious, kind of a thing. And so there's something similar going on in that show. Yeah, let me see if there's one more and then we're out of time. Somebody says, does awakening to the shift have a cause? Quote unquote cause. The cause of everything is what true creative essence, my name for the author, capital T, capital A, the author of all of our stories, of everything that's happening in the human experience. The cause is always that these things were written into our story so that who we really are, true creative essence, and us as characters, but there's a lot more to it than that, can have these unique experiences. So the cause is always true creative essence, the writer, just like it is with a novel or a movie or a TV show. And the effect is always what we experience. Simple answer to a very big question, but that's always the cause, and you could language it as part of your story, part of your journey, supports you fulfilling your mission and purpose in your unique way, having the unique experiences that your whole life is all about. That's always the cause. That these things that are happening to us somehow, whether we understand it all now, whether we understand it all ever, it's always the truth, my bias, my experience, that it's contributing to the fulfillment of our missions and purposes and the perfect unfolding of our unique stories and journeys. Last question. So according to the seeming bias of the movie The Truman Show, waking up, quote unquote, although it looked like he broke out of the script, it was just more seeming expanded scripting. This is the mind, no disrespect intended, trying to understand this and dance at ideas and concepts, and kind of yes and kind of no, as I understand your question. But with all due respect, I feel like saying it doesn't matter what was going on in the Truman Show. These things are useful and they're helpful as metaphors and pointers, but my invitation to you, Tara, and everybody else is let's bring it back to us. Let's bring it back to practical benefit on our journeys and our stories, away from pure ideas and concepts and theories and thinking, and bring it back to tangible, practical benefit in our lives, which is ultimately where my journey went, as I mentioned before. I don't care about all these cool ideas and philosophies and theories and explanations about all these things that are in all the books and workshops and seminars and audios and videos, unless it has practical value on changing my quality of life in a deep, profound, and permanent way. And for me, takes me deeper and deeper and deeper into an experience of truth with a capital T. If it doesn't do that, if there isn't practical value, if it doesn't actually change something, which is the way I was, I'm not now, then I don't care. And that's ultimately where I had to go, and it's where a lot of the people, if not all, that come to me ended up going. I don't care about the party line anymore. I don't care about what all the books say. I don't care about what all the experts and workshops and seminars and all these magical technique stuff, I don't care what any of that says anymore. I just want to know what's true with a capital T. I want to experience what's true with a capital T. And I want my experience of my life to change in a practical, permanent, deep, and profound way. That's where I went ultimately on my journey. That's what opened the door. That's what led to this shift. And how it compares to something in a movie or some other story, to me, isn't really relevant. So, and no disrespect or criticism or judgment intended. So, I'd love to see, before you go away, if you're still here, I'd love to see some comments, shares about how you have received what was set into motion, what you think, feel, see, how something may have shifted if it did from what I shared with you here. I'd really love to see that. I'd appreciate it, as I'm sure would other people paying attention. Again, next week, we're going to move on, taking everything I've shared in episodes 2 through 7, tie it all together, and then move into, okay, again, practical day-to-day life. Okay, what do I do with all of this, Robert? And I touched on some of that today. How do I live my life? And what's this experience, really all about? How can it change things, kind of a thing. We'll start that discussion at least next week. We'll see how much I can get done next week as to how many episodes it continues. So I have a closing message for you before we go for this week. And then thank you again for joining me here, participating, sharing your comments and questions, and being with me here, whether it's on video or it was live. And I'll look forward to our next form of contact, whatever shape that takes. And here is my closing message for you. Bye-bye for now. For more information on how I can help you unblock yourself and experience ultimate freedom, visit my website, robertscheinfeld.com, and while you're there, get the guide. The guide will open a gateway into a free video masterclass that gives you all the details.